Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Caroline Campbell, and I am the Urban Projects Officer within the Woodland Trust. And joined the Trust back in November, just as we were launching tree equity, and it's been a really exciting time to be part of the Trust. This is very much my background. I love trees and nature, but I love that brings in people, which is my kind of real passion. I love that we're bringing those together with Tree Equity Scores today. So it's great to be here with you. And I've got my colleague Russell Horsey, who is joining me, and I'll let him introduce himself.
Yep. So hi, I'm Russell Horsey. I'm an independent urban forestry consultant based in Wales, but we've worked with the Trust Urban team for about 6 years, providing advice to them. So yeah, look forward to chatting to you today.
Sorry, Pete, we've got screen sharing disabled. Maybe enable it for me.
Hopefully you'll be able to share your screen now.
There we go, perfect. There we go. So yes, so today we are going to be talking to you about Tree Equity Score UK. So what is Tree Equity Score UK? So we know at the Woodland Trust that we've not invented tree equity. It is a concept that many people working in urban forestry and outside of urban areas have been looking at tree equity for a number of years. But what we've done is create a standard for assessing the levels of urban tree cover and considering the benefits of those to people. It does currently only cover urban areas. But there are plans. We are in talks of how we extend that. We know that tree equity isn't only relevant to urban areas, and we are keen to bring in other areas. But Russell will speak later about how, although this score tool covers urban areas, that doesn't mean that you can't still consider tree equity, and there are other resources available for that, which Russell will go over. It can be used as a prioritization tool. So we add a priority range. So from no priority where they've achieved tree equity to our highest priorities based on the level of cover. It covers 35,000 neighbourhoods across the UK and is adapted from the US. So it was originally created by American forests, who wanted to see this brought into other areas and see how it would apply. We've looked at trees, but this is where it brings in people and it merges those together. So we look at socio-demographics, which I'll go over later, and we have looked at that in the 4 different countries, and it is slightly different based on those countries. We have been very lucky to have a large number of people who have contributed to the development of Tree Equity Score UK. And these are our main partners, but there have been a lot of conversations, and without those people, the development of this wouldn't have been possible. So I do want to take a moment just to acknowledge those and thank those. And one of those was Russell at Woodland Dwelling, and yeah, their help was absolutely invaluable. So the tool came out of a place really of knowing that we have inequity in the UK. We know that we have got very green leafy urban areas, such as this is an area in Sheffield that has a score of 100 compared to an area in Grimsby with a score of 61. And when you look at these aerial photographs, the contrast is quite stark. And we wanted to look at, well, if we know this, how do we actually measure that to show it? There's a difference between knowing it and being able to put a number against it. And then looking at them, what do we then do about it, which is what really this tool is about. It's not just about being able to know that number, but it's how we can use that to change that. So it included an initial UK-wide data analysis where we've looked at some of that data that we've got, and we are in the process of commissioning a wider, deeper analysis into what this tool and its data actually tells us. So we know from already that the most affluent areas have more than double the tree cover in comparison to the least affluent areas. We know that where neighbourhoods where tree cover per person is at its highest, they have roughly a third less NO2 pollution and 10% less PM2.5 pollution, and the 4 degrees cooler. And we also know that neighbourhoods with the most people that are identifying as an ethnic minority group have roughly half the tree canopy cover per person. Again, looking at that 10th and 90th percentile groups. So we know there are real differences, disparities between the tree cover that people have and the impact that that has. And obviously people have, if there is that difference in tree canopy cover and access to trees, it's those people in those areas have less access to the benefits of trees. And that really is what this is about, getting that, not an equal access, but having that equality based access, and knowing that different people will need different tools to be able to access those benefits of trees. And so I'm going to hand over to Russell now, who will speak about tree equity in rural areas. So the tool itself covers those urban areas based on government definitions of an urban area. But that doesn't, as I said, that doesn't mean we can't consider tree equity in rural areas, which Russell will discuss with you now.
Thank you. So yeah, we'll show you the tree equity tool in a minute, but basically tree equity as a tool is pulling together a number of different factors to give a scoring. So it's looking at income, employment, issues of heat, issues of health inequalities, and issues of air pollution. But those data sets are all available and they're all in GIS. So actually there's no reason, if you're within a more rural location, that you can't start to look at those areas in terms of how you define. So you can kind of take the principles of looking at tree equity and you can use those potentially to design where you might want to plant trees. So for here, we've got, there's a couple of examples here, which I'll also drop into the chat, one from Neathport Talbot, which is the MPT, and then one from West Northamptonshire Council. And so what we can see here is we've got down here we've got tree equity dropped in, but we've got large areas where there isn't a ranking, so it's kind of grayed out. But actually what you can start to do is you can see here on the top right, the sort of more multicolored screenshot is here. We've got some of these different data sets have been pulled into a GIS application. And so with the one you can see here, it's looking at air quality, and using a slider for air quality, you can start to see the areas you should prioritize. Now, a lot of this data is collected at a lower super output area. And so that basically is around 1,500 people. And so you can get to quite narrow areas, which means that, even if you are quite rural, you can start to look at sort of towns, villages where, there may be areas of deprivation and there may be areas of low canopy cover. And what you can also start to do is you can start to use sort of GIS tools now to start to work out how many trees. So we're doing quite a lot of work with a number of councils at the moment looking at canopy targets. Pete talked on Sunday about the need to get to 40% canopy cover in terms of heat disparities. And so what we can start to do is we can start to model now how many kinds of, what size of trees you need to start to plant. So even if you're in a more rural area where the tree equity score isn't currently available, you can use those data sets, and those data sets are available to start to look at how you should prioritize. And I think, it's really important. I've been a tree officer for about 20 years in different places across the UK. And it was very difficult when politicians came saying, I want trees, because it tended to be the ones in the more affluent areas that were the ones that were asking. Whereas actually it was the less affluent areas and the areas of deprivation was where I wanted to plant. Carol, can I have the next slide, please? So what is tree equity score? So tree equity score is about setting a canopy cover goal, and initially the goal that's been proposed is sort of 30%, because we know we get benefits, and in fact for some areas that's going to be quite difficult to do. In some areas that when you start to exclude farmland, high grade agricultural farmland, it might be that an authority potentially could only get to 20-25%, and even that in itself is going to be quite a significant jump. What it does initially, the tool is it's measuring existing canopy cover, and so what's been quite a bit of a game changer is that Google has come into this and is starting to look at this canopy cover. Previously, there were other private companies available that did produce this, but it's quite expensive to get that data, which again has limited the number of people starting to look at measuring canopy cover and looking at targets. And then what it then looks to do is it then looks to multiply looking at the priority index, which as you can see there is made up of health, income, unemployment, heat disparity, air quality, and looking at other data sets. And then that finally gives you your tree equity score. And so what, if you're in a good area of tree equity, then your score should be closer to 100%, to 100. And if you're in, lower areas, then that will also start to show. Caroline, next slide, please. So I said one of the big changes as part of this project is that Google has come in and is basically starting to provide very good data actually from 22-23. It's covering 35,000 urban neighborhoods, and at the moment it's just for urban areas. Google is looking at providing that sort of data in more rural areas, and that data, if you are in an urban local authority, is now freely available. So you can you can ask to get that. And it's basically used satellite imagery and machine learning to work out where those trees are. And it's been pushed down to these LSOA areas because that's where a lot of the data is held. So what you can see here is you can see an overview where part of an urban area has been broken down into those lower super output areas. And then you can see 12%. So that one area has that's what its current canopy cover is. Next slide, please. The data where it is available is very good. So you can see here that you can get down to sort of individual trees, and that data is potentially going to only get better and better. And if you want to look to get that data, if you go to the Google Environmental Insights Explorer, then if you're a local authority, you can request the data that is available, and you can have that free of charge. And so again, you can drop this into existing GIS packages. And so again, if you've got a council GIS package or you've got a third-party GIS package, you can drop these data sets in and you can start to see, where your existing trees are. Again, we're seeing a lot of councils wanting to start to use this where maybe they don't know where their trees are, because you can overlay land ownership and then you can start to work out where you might want to go out and find trees and look to survey. Next slide, please. In terms of setting canopy cover goals, the US approach has been by biome because they've got multiple biomes. Now in the UK, we've only got one biome, so that makes it a lot easier. And the sort of the Test UK target initially is going to be 30%. So we've done some work now with a number of different local authorities, and for some of them that's going to be quite difficult to do, as I mentioned. So it doesn't mean to say you should just rush out and put 30% in a sort of canopy target. I think you need to work out what available space you've got. You need to look at some of these issues, and we're especially seeing that here in Wales. It's quite contentious to plant trees on farmland. So if you're setting a target, should you be removing farmland from that? You should be using GIS to remove things like sports pitches, which you're never going to plant, and just to make sure that you've got a realistic target. There has been some work done within the model also to look at population densities, and so the TES value can be adjusted down in higher density areas, recognizing that it's going to be more difficult to do. It's also starting to feed into other different strategic rules that are coming out. So you may have come across the 330-300 rule. And so that's a new research paper that came out about 18 months ago, suggesting that there are health benefits that if you can see 3 trees from your property, you're in an area with 30% canopy cover, and you're within 300 meters of a park that you can go and use for health. And so again, all of these things are going to feed into local authority tree strategies. And I think the 30%, is there as a target. If we look at a lot of places, I think the average cover in a lot of towns and cities is between 16 and 20%. And so to get to 30% is quite a significant shift. We're working with one authority at the moment where their average canopy cover is 7%. So actually, and it's not going to be possible for them initially, I think, in their first tree strategy to jump to 30%. So we'll be working with them to set a sort of a figure somewhere around the 20%, which is going to be quite challenging. Next slide, Caroline. So Caroline's now going to jump in and share the tree equities tool just to give you a quick on screen to see how it works. So we'll just, do you want to switch, Caroline?
Perfect, thank you. So yes, I'm going to introduce the tree equity score tool to you now. It works very simply put on the basis of the lower the score, the greater the priority for tree planting. And a score of 100 means that the neighbourhood has met those tree canopy goals. So, over on the Woodland Trust website, we have a tree equity page, and it goes over a very brief introduction of what tree equity is, why it's important, and how we'd like to see that embedded in the UK. But then we've got the tree equity score tool itself, which leads you through to this page. Now, on this page, I do want to very briefly cover some of the additional things that are on here that may be useful. So it does go over how it works, but when you come down to this section, it talks about the methods that have gone into it, our data glossary, what we mean by those terms. Within our more info, we have got some frequently asked questions, but we've also then got a data download. So you can download this data. So this is a completely free to access tool, and we have made our data open to the public to download. You can do that on a UK level or on based on the 4 countries, and you can, local authorities can then use that to take out their data. The only bit that isn't covered within that is the canopy data from Google itself. So all of the tree canopy data was donated by Google, and we are in discussions between ourselves, American Forests and Google about how we can make that available to the general public so that you have that understanding. But there are other ways to kind of look at that, but that is included within the tool. It just can't be downloaded as a whole data set. So then we come to the map itself. So when you first come onto it, this is what it looks like. And you can use your mouse button to scroll in and out. Now, the green areas are the urban areas that are covered. Now, I do want to at this point out that there are some areas of Wales that are considered urban that aren't quite covered within the tool currently. And because we don't have adequate tree canopy data from Google, because they're when it's gone over, it was too cloudy, poor weather, or one of those kind of reasons. So it wasn't of a quality that they could analyze. So we are at the Woodland Trust manually going through that. We've got a team of people who are analysing that, and we are hoping to get that completely added and complete within the next couple of months. So if you are in an urban area that when you've had a look at this, it isn't on there. If you do want to drop me an email, I can keep you updated and let you know when your area is added. So when you zoom kind of right out, you just see that everything is green, and that just shows you our urban areas. As you zoom in, you can see this kind of the changes of colours, and basically it's simply that the more orange it is, the lower the score, and therefore the higher the priority. The more green it is, the higher the score and the lower the priority. So if I have a look in, so that's when we look at that kind of whole area, their composite score. When you then look at an urban area in more detail, it's broken down into LSOAs or data zones for Scotland. So this gives you a very quick picture of those areas of difference, and you can kind of very clearly see that the much more green areas that are grouped together, and then these areas. And we have found one of the things that we have noticed, and we're interested to see that comes out in this research. We're finding that actually a lot of the coastal areas are automatically lower scores, and we understand to some extent why we know that being an urban area presents challenges. We know that being on the coast presents challenges. But what we really want this to do is look at, well, then what can we do about some of those things. So for example, if I have a look at this area of Cardiff, it then brings up this overview. So it tells you how much of that LSO area is considered urban. Its tree equity score, which is 4 to 6. It ranks it in terms of the LSOAs in Cardiff. So this is the fourth lowest in Cardiff with the highest priority. So as you can see from this, highest priorities are scores between 0 and 69. If you're between 70 and 79, you're considered a high priority. Moderate for 80 to 89, low from 90 to 99. And if you've achieved your equity, it's not considered a priority. So it gives you your current canopy cover. So for this LSOA, they currently got 10% canopy coverage. And we set that their goal is 36. Now, that does come with a bit of a caveat of, we have looked at that against population density, and there is a factor adjustment based on population density. One of the things we are looking at is whether this could be adapted to look at building density instead, and what impact that would have. Because it's very different if you have an area where there are lots of houses all spread out, taking up lots of space. But if you put all of those people into high-rise buildings, you would potentially have more space outside. If you are in an industrial area, your population density might be low because people don't live in that area because it's not an industrial area. But that doesn't mean that that is necessarily plantable space, because it is still used. So we are looking at how this can be adapted and improved. It is now launched, it's ready to use, but it's not we sent it out there, it's done, we know it's ongoing, we will always be looking for ways to make it better. And so if you do have a look at this, we would always love any feedback on how you've used it, any issues you found, any things that you think could make it more useful to you. And my email address for Tree Equity is at the end, and so we would love anyone to share any of that with us. We then have these priority index indicators. So these are the factors that we've considered, those socio-demographics that have factored into the Tree Equity score, but it gives you that overview of that people side of things with income, health, employment, children and older people, and also that environmental side of things with their heat disparity and the air pollution. I'll go with this bit. So we've also here got dynamic reports. So you can use these reports at a local authority level, at a constituency level, and at a country-based level. So if we look at the constituency of Cardiff, South and Penarth, it again gives you that summary, and it shows you the distribution of tree equity scores. You can then look at tree canopy coverage against heat disparity, air pollution and income ranking. So this was some of what we were talking about earlier when we said about, we know that areas of highest tree canopy coverage have the highest number of the highest tree canopy coverage. And this just kind of puts that into a nice chart and gives you some further insight into that. We then have a section here where it talks about what would be needed to get all of those LSOAs to a certain tree equity score. And that is adjustable. You know, we would love every LSOA in the entire of the UK to set a target of 100, but that's not achievable. It's not realistic. And that's not something that is going to happen overnight. So we may have a local authority that says, you know, for now, we want to get everyone to a score of 60. And that would show them that there are 6 areas to focus on, and what canopy coverage will be added, and it then gives some kind of benefit of that, and we then include a map. And as I've said, we can also look at that on a local authority and a country-based level. So if we looked at Wales more widely, it breaks down further of where that distribution is, what would be needed. So if we adjusted that back down to 60, actually from what we've got so far, there would then be 78 LSOAs across the country to get to that score. But the bit where potentially it can be really useful, and this is where we think it can be really helpful as that prioritization tool, is we have a number of like these filters and these layers on the side. So as default, you see tree equity score, but you can change that to look at the tree canopy cover or that gap. So that's the gap between what their current is and the goal that we've set. You can also then look at those priority and socio-demographics to really identify some of those areas. And you can also, this is where you overlay, and won't really show in this, but say, for example, where I live, and I live right near some moors, which if you looked at tree equity, it would look low, but they are peatlands. we can't plant trees on those, we won't want to, and it can just help give that slightly bigger picture. But then you can also look at the urban, you can look at the urban areas within each of those LSOAs. And also switch to a satellite view to give you a bit of a better idea of what some of those areas may look like. We can then head over and look at filters. So this is where we could, if let's say potentially if there was a funding application where it was linked to air pollution, you could use it to filter areas that have both, say, a score of under 75, but also have high areas of pollution. And it would then show you those areas that could become prioritised. Or if there was, say, we've got the NHS forest or other funding that was potentially linked to health. So it can, we want this to hopefully open up some conversations and some funding applications that will help meet more than just one. We know that trees are the answer to a number of problems, but we know that it can't just be one person's answer to it. So it can be used to bring in other areas, other people into those discussions, and look at how other people can support it. So that is a very brief overview of that. I have got a link to point you towards that, and I'm more than happy to arrange individual calls if anyone wants to go in it to any further detail. But I'm just going to hand back to Russell now, who is going to talk a little bit about that was our why, this is our what, where are we at, and this is the kind of the next steps and how this can then be turned into actions and what we do with it. So I'll hand over to Russell.
Thank you. So, as I say, tree equity has come from the States and it's been used there for a number of years, and it's been quite pioneering there in terms of the sector's ability to talk to government. I think, and we've probably got the same issues over here in terms of it. There's lots of people talking to government, asking for funding, and it's very difficult to state your case. And this is allowing policymakers to make that case. And what it's led to is something called the Inflation Reduction Act in America, which basically has given £1.5 billion worth of investment over the next 10 years, funded up front actually, which is going into urban forestry. And actually, what's also quite interesting here is it's not just about planting trees. A big part of this is about upskilling. It's about getting more people into the sector and recognizing that the trees are sort of the delivery mechanism, but actually, upskilling and giving people more jobs is where we're going. And what that also is then doing is starting to bring in additional private sector funding, because businesses can start to see where their money's going. They can start to use some of the iTree benefits to start to see some of the outcomes. And so it's giving a much better way for the sector to sort of also bring in sort of private funding. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to do a quick couple of minutes looking at case studies. So we've been working with a group called East Marsh United and the Create Streets Foundation up in Grimsby for the last couple of years. We were kind of drawn to the area initially because East Marsh United is a not-for-profit that's been produced actually not initially to tree plant. They're actually interested in taking slum landlords, taking homes and upskilling and sort of bringing homes back into better use. So they're kind of a good social landlord. And there's an area in Grimsby known as the Murder Mile, which is Rutland Street. And even 3 or 4 years ago, if you look up on the news, people were being firebombed out of their houses. One of the things that East Marsh wanted to do is they also wanted a green. So if you look at Grimsby, and this was before tree equity actually came out, it's a very stark place. There is very little green. There are a few parks. Even those parks aren't that well treed. When tree equity came out, it turned out that actually East Marsh had one of the lowest tree equity scores of 46 in the UK, and so that was really sort of backs up where we've already been working. And we've been doing a lot of work with local residents and with local groups to sort of look at what they wanted to do to Rutland Street. And the outcome was that they're kind of looking at probably a cheaper, greener Grangetown, if I'm honest, but with new street trees going in. But that is going to be quite challenging. It's an area of high deprivation. There isn't a lot of money. We haven't seen much levelling up money go there. So whilst that's the sort of longer term aspiration, it wasn't a place we could start to green. Next slide, please. I've kind of been doing community engagement and planting for about 25 years across the UK. And actually, sort of one thing we said to East Marsh was we really want to work with residents to start to take you on a journey, because actually we need to look at the easier wins. The council didn't have a lot of money, so suddenly going in and putting trees onto Rutland Street was not easy. So we were successful in winning some money from the English government, and the initial project was actually just to put trees back into the local park. And East Marsh United were very good at getting out. Sort of 250 people came out to plant. Local schools were engaged. The local football team came out. Everyone was very skeptical. We were told the trees were all going to be vandalized. In fact, finishing the first planting there, we were being told as residents came home, they won't survive the night. But because there was so much community engagement, interaction, we did a lot of workshops. The trees that went in were heavily protected in terms of guards. All the trees have done very well. Local residents have taken them on, and it's part of this sense of pride. So trees are part of this sense of pride. It's not just about doing up the houses for East Marsh. It's about making the area nicer to live. And so this was a really important process, because the council were also very skeptical in terms of we've planted trees in the East Marsh in the past and they've just been vandalised, and they were very skeptical that would happen again. And so, by working with residents, and I think this is where, for me, I've always probably worked with tree groups, and actually East Marsh isn't a tree group. They're more interested in housing is what they do, but actually they see the green as part of it. So first year was planting up in the park, and that's been really successful. And then next slide, please. And then this year, to continue building that, we've then gone on to schools. And so we've worked with East Marsh, we've gone into individual schools, we've come up with design plans to find out what they want. And in a lot of cases, they are looking for shade. So we've looked to put standard trees at final spacings in order to make sure there's space for them to grow. They've also been very interested in thick hedgerows because of issues of antisocial behaviour. Means that there's been concern about children using playing fields because they're in heavily polluted areas. People have been shouting through the railings at the children, and it's not been a nice place. So what we've done there is probably a couple of miles of hedgerows. We've put 100 standards in, and about 1,000 children have come to be engaged. And I think what's also been quite interesting is we're seeing a lot of this, people wanting to plant tiny forests. They're very expensive. We planted in 8 schools with about 5,500 whips. It's a couple of miles of hedgerows, 1 forest, and about 100 standards for the same price as a tiny forest. So I think, again, if we're going to look to increase canopy cover, we really need to look at where those funds are going. Next slide, please.